Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 62nd edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast, recorded here in central London, just off historic Abbey Road. And I want to thank everybody who listened to our interview with Amanda Lehman on the last episode. Amanda is a multi-talented musician, artist, singer, songwriter, whose album Innocence Illusion was one of my favorites that I picked up in 2021. Obviously, we found her through seeing her play with Steve Hackett live, but she's not just Steve Hackett's sometimes guitar player singer. She is an artist in her own right, and I think her album Innocence and Illusion deserves some interest, deserves people to go out and listen to it and buy it and understand what she's up to. Now, usually we do albums that have been out for decades from some of the biggest bands that ever lived. And hey, if you pick up a copy of Led Zeppelin 4 thanks to our reviewing it, well, that's great, but that doesn't really move the needle for Led Zeppelin or Jimmy Page or Robert Plant. But going out and picking up Amanda's album really does make a difference. It helps her get a little bit more PR. It helps more people find this great musician and understand what she's all about. So hopefully after hearing that, some of you did in fact go out and do that, and I encourage you to do it now if you haven't already. If you did listen to that, you heard at the end that we were going to then review Guns N' Roses' debut, Appetite for Destruction, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. That was our plan. But the fact of the matter is, we plan out our shows about a month to a month and a half in advance. It just gives us an opportunity to make sure we know what we're talking about in advance. We can do more research, listen to these or re-listen to the albums a few more times before we get on and speak about them. And it just so happened that the weekend that we were recording a show on Neil Young, not only for Harvest, which turns 50 this year, but its follow-up, Harvest Moon, which turns 30. Just as we were recording that, he got himself in the news, basically going to war with Spotify and Joe Rogan, because he's upset that Joe Rogan is spreading lies and misinformation about COVID-19. So he basically told Spotify, you can have Rogan or you can have Young, but you can't have both. You decide. So he pulled his music off Spotify. And Joni Mitchell was quick to follow him. And I think maybe the Foo Fighters did as well. Other bands and artists are considering doing the same thing. So to capitalize on the heat on Neil Young, we thought we'd rush this one forward and put it out this week for you. Now, I found Neil Young when I was in college, basically, and thought he was an amazing musician who could not only do great country, folk, rock, acoustic stuff, but was a wailer on that electric guitar, not unlike Jimi Hendrix. Could really pump out some great sound and killer solos and stuff like Hurricane, Cowgirl on the Stand, stuff that I really liked. So for over a month or two, we've been talking about reviewing these two classic Neil albums, and it just so happens that this week, it was when he was taking on Spotify, one of the greatest, biggest streamers of music in the world, and home to the world's most popular podcast, which is Joe Rogan's. Just a little more popular than The Wolf here. So we're going to dive into that this week. Guns N' Roses will be next week. Now, a little business to take care of. You can always tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjacks72. You can DM us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you're listening to or what we should review, bands we need to know about, and maybe points we might have missed on our past episodes. If you give us a 5-star review, which is super helpful for us, it helps us find more great listeners like you and helps get more attention to the show. Send it to us. We might just read it on the air. And we're having a lot of fun at Good Pods. Good Pods is a great place for independent podcasters like us and fans and listeners to connect. So please check us out on Good Pods, and if you have an inkling, please give us a good review there. So with that, despite the controversy, despite everything in the news, we're going to move forward and tell you about a couple of great Neil Young albums celebrating big anniversaries this year. Harvest, which was a groundbreaker for him, really broke him out as a solo artist. It was the album of the year in 1972. And its follow-up, Harvest Moon, which he made 20 years later with the same cast of characters, using the same kind of technology and recording techniques to kind of revisit this big statement, this huge success from him from 20 years previously. So that's what we're up to this week. It's about Neil Young, Harvest, and Harvest Moon here on The Wolf. But how about Neil Young? I mean, I guess he knew that we wanted to do a show about him. So he's like, I guess what I could do is help those guys out. I'm not going to come on the show or have anyone I know be on the show, anyone who's involved in either of the albums they're going to talk about on the show. But what I will do is take on the biggest streaming service, one of the biggest streaming services in the world, take on the number one podcast in the world. And no, listeners, it's not the Ugly American Werewolf in London they're taking on. As big as we are, I think we trail Joe Rogan by a few thousand downloads or something like that per second. Anyway.
We'll get there.
No, he has to go. Neil goes out and gets himself shut off. I mean, he's so woke, he's canceling himself on Spotify, yes?
You gotta love somebody who, I mean, love him or hate him, he's got his values and he sticks to them, and I don't think he really cares what anybody thinks about him, because he got a huge backlash, and, people, of course, now it's Kid Rock versus, Neil Young, and who do you like better? I don't really think he cares. I think he's got his beat that he marches to. If you like him, cool, and if you don't, that's okay also.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen him taking a lot of shit from fans over the years, and at concerts too, when he was with Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young when I guess George W. Bush was the president. Going and said, "Let's impeach the president" is one of his songs. You got people flipping him off during the song, like pointing it right at him, cursing him out, leaving the arena or whatever, leaving the fairgrounds. He's not afraid to do what he wants. I mean, what was your first impression of Neil Young? Because not how you came to find it maybe, but what was your first impression of him? Because mine was in the late 80s, we're MTV heads, and he puts out this song, This Note's For You, right? Which also has a video that kind of attacks his fellow musicians for selling out. He's got Michael Jackson dancing with his head on fire, for Pepsi, and making fun of, Clapton, Steve Winwood, and Genesis, who all did the Michelob Light, commercials around that time. But yeah, so he was kind of taking the piss out of them. It got banned from MTV because Michael Jackson's people didn't like that, right? Showing Michael on fire like that. But the problem was when you ban it, then people really want it, and this is MTV, so then they gave it Video of the Year at the MTV Awards. And I didn't know who Neil Young was before that, right? Because I always had to have been a child of the 60s or 70s. My dad wasn't really into country folk. He liked rock and roll, but he didn't really like that sound, so I never heard him much really growing up. How about you?
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't know a whole bunch about Neil Young, other than the fact that, okay, I knew he was in Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young for a while. I think I had heard Ohio on the radio like a million years ago. Yeah, he kind of just seemed like a weirdo to me. You were talking about that video. Why would you do that? Why would you go out of your way to point out, your contemporaries as sellouts?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But then, so what year was that, do you think?
Oh, gosh. 89 or so, in there.
Okay. Because he was the one that did Farm Aid.
Right.
He started that whole thing. So you think, well, he can't be all bad because he obviously is so passionate about this cause that he goes out of his way to organize this giant relief thing. You kind of already had, when was that Farm Aid? I think that was after We Are the World. So that I think that had kind of died out a little bit. Band-Aid had kind of died out. So this was kind of a new thing, new cause for people to get involved with.
Which continued for a long time. I mean, it wasn't like there was one Farm Aid. There was an annual Farm Aid for 20 plus years, right?
Yeah, and he got big time people. I know Willie Nelson was always there. Mellencamp was there a lot. So he was always kind of a guy who, what is his deal? He seems very passionate, but then he also seems like he doesn't really care. And I think you go back and look through the music that he makes, he's all over the map. It's literally what do I feel like doing today? This? Okay, I'm going to put this record out. And if you like it, cool. And if you don't, I don't care.
Yeah, and I'll make another one 9 months later anyway, it seems. I mean, he's prolific, if anything.
Yes.
Especially in the last 20 years when most musicians of his age aren't recording at all. If they're lucky, they're out touring and making some money that way, doing the same old tunes. Mm-hmm. But nobody continues to record the way Neil Young has. It's kind of amazing. And I was just looking at, because we're reviewing Harvest, which turns 50 this year, but Harvest Moon, which turns 30. And it was the kind of 20-year reflection of Harvest, which we'll get into. It was Harvest Moon was his 19th album. Well, that's 30 years ago. He's made he must have made 20 albums since then, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Well, and the thing for me, going back to Harvest, if you asked me, and I asked a couple of people while I was doing research for this, what was the biggest selling album of 1972?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would say this. It was like, I don't know, what, like John Denver or something?
Right.
Captain and Tennille? I have no idea. To think that it was a prolific album, but it was also massively successful. Those two things don't usually go together, especially some of the stuff that he's talking about on this record.
I know.
Ooh.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, but no, you're talking about number one for the year, like U.S., and it hit the top in like the U.K., Australia, France, Canada. Of course, he's from Canada, but I mean, that's a lot of the English, music buying public right there. He's number one all over the world.
And when you look at the tracks on this thing, there are. I mean, obviously, Heart of Gold was a huge single for him, but other than that, I mean, there aren't really, like, usually you think number one albums have, like, Thriller was a number one album. It had like 7 singles off of it or something ridiculous like that. This didn't really have that. I think it had 2 singles maybe, and it was just the rest of the music that propelled it. Once people got a hold of it, everybody had to have a copy of it.
Well, it's familiar. He's coming off some success with Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Obviously, he'd been in Buffalo, Springfield before that. I think he was actually in the Minor Birds with Rick James. Yes. That Rick James.
Yeah, that is it. And I told somebody that last night. They're like, oh, another guy named Rick James. No. You know who I'm talking about.
Rick James.
That same Rick James, correct. And apparently, according to Young, he was a really great musician. Like, he could sing, he could play the bass.
Yeah.
He just flipped out later in life. But at one point in time, Rick James was a phenomenal musician.
Yeah, I guess I think he was in the Navy, but he went AWOL or something like that, and or maybe he was drafted and he went to Canada, and that's where he met Neil. Neil's from Canada. And they gotten signed. They were going to do something, and then it was like, no, he's got to go serve his time for ditching the going to the brig or whatever for ditching the armed forces. And so that broke up the Minor Birds, and it changed both of their fortunes. I don't know for the better or for worse. They both did pretty well at the end of the day. But no, this is Neil Young really becoming a solo artist. I think he was one of those guys, kind of like Eric Clapton. Is like he liked being in a band, right? He liked being in Buffalo Springfield. He liked being in CSNY, right? He liked being a part of something, and now as a solo artist, now he's number one album of the year, millions of copies sold, hits on the radio, and then he didn't run towards that though, right?
It's interesting you say that because you were talking about being part of a band. He really kind of was part of a band for Harvest. Like, he took those guys and named them the Stray Gators.
Right.
So even though this was a Neil Young record, were you trying to just recreate that band feel, like we're all hanging out together and playing this, trying to come up with this one piece of music as kind of a band, but not really?
Yeah. Yeah, and he's a guy, he's Canadian, but he's more of a Southern, he's more for being a California guy, really, these days. I feel like both Southern and Northern California, really. But he recorded Harvest in Nashville after, I guess, doing a thing with Johnny Cash. Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor were doing a Johnny Cash show. Somebody convinced him he needs to come record down there. And he takes a look around. He's like, good studios. Wow, lots of talent around here. Yeah, okay. It fits into my country folk thing, absolutely. You need pedal steel player? Yeah, I get you one of those, You need a rhythm section? I guarantee you I've got people for it. Yeah, and he put together this classic crew to make this record, who, yes, he did gather all that he could of that crew to come back and help him 20 years afterwards.
Which was another big change of pace from what he'd been doing up until that point. He'd been doing the Crazy Horse and the, Rockin' in the Free World. That was that at least on rock radio, that was a big hit. And then to switch gears again and go back to almost like revisit Harvest 20 years later. I know that, like, what was the Harvest Moon was the single. And I remember that came out when we were in college, and it's just like, wait a minute, what's he doing now? Because I thought he was rocking in the Free World, and like a couple of those songs, like what is it, Hey Hey My, Out of the Black, or Into the Blue. There's one that's acoustic and one that's electric.
Right.
The electric one is probably some of the greasiest guitar you're ever going to hear.
Pretty heavy, isn't it?
Yeah. And then you go into this, and it's like, so really he can just do anything whenever he feels like it.
Well, yeah, and I feel like he reserves that heavier stuff for Crazy Horse. He can certainly do a lot of acoustic and piano kind of stuff on his own. He doesn't even need accompaniment for that, I don't think. But yeah, and he can play with whomever he wants, and he's been playing with Promise the Real, which I think are a couple of Willie Nelson's kids, playing with them for years now, So yeah, he kind of amalgamates groups and he plays with them, then he kind of moves on to another one and plays with them. Obviously, CSNY is the most famous of those. But then he also has Crazy Horse, but then he also has the Harvest Moon folks. He's also got Promise of the Real. He's got a lot of friends all over the place. Yeah, you're right. His sound does change, but he also just is an open channel, right? I mean, to write all these songs over all these many decades, talking 6-7 decades of recording music here, man. And he does it with different instruments. He does it in different styles. He's a channel.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think if you were to go and see him like in his private life, he's probably always got a guitar somewhere. His brain is always churning.
Mm-hmm.
He's not one of these guys, I don't think anyway, that's like, oh man, I got to write something. Okay. There's always something going on. Like he sees something and can turn that into music. And there's a lot of the stuff on here that is kind of, stuff that you would see out in the world. And then he turns that into like life stories into these songs.
Absolutely. Right. And that's the folk country perspective, right? Talking about stories that everyone can relate to, real life, everyday stories of love and loss and heartache and the good moments in life, the things you gotta, Harvest Moon, he's singing about his dog. I love a song about a good old dog, man. That's
mm-hmm.
what life's about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a dog.
But I mean, like if you didn't know who this was and you just saw, here's a picture of Neil Young. He's a bazillionaire, but also kind of looks like a homeless guy.
Right.
Like he just kind of defies convention, and he could really be somebody that could be sitting anywhere just playing the guitar on the side of a street, and just because he loves it. I think he's always been the guy that like he just defies convention. Like I'm not gonna fit into a box. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. I'm gonna look how I want. I'm gonna sound how I want, and this is just what's happening.
And now his, wife, partner, muse type is Daryl Hannah. And yes, you're right. He looks like he might be homeless. He's with like one of the most beautiful women going. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it works out. By the way, apparently it was, okay, so I wanted to go back to my Neil Young backstory before we get into the records. So first, back to the fact that he won Video of the Year for this Notes for You after it was banned by MTV, and that MTV had to give him this award as like Video of the Year, right? I think that upset some people at MTV, because although I've eventually heard the audio, I watched the MTV Awards live that year. And this would have been 89 or 90 when we were in high school.
Okay.
And the audio cut out for Neil while he was taking his acceptance speech. The audio cut out because he wasn't there. It was done remotely. Like he didn't show up, but he was there and ready to say thank you. And he had a couple other celebrities with him. I can't remember, but I remember seeing Daryl Hannah. He's like, oh, wow, Daryl Hannah's where he is. She's pretty hot. Allegedly, that was the first time they'd ever met. It was just she was there at that party or whatever with Neil when he got that award.
Really?
I've never heard it said this way, but I'm telling you, MTV was bitter. Someone at MTV didn't like the fact that they had to give an award to something that they had turned off or whatever. So they cut the audio for the live feed. That's what I think happened. That's what I remember happening. MTV can explain it their own way.
Yeah, I mean, that is awfully convenient. Like you said, all those things went together and just magically the thing cut out. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, but so now we flash forward to 1992, after our freshman year of college, right? I'm back in Louisville, and I'm driving around in the middle of the day, and there was a DJ called Duke on the radio, and he had this lunchtime program, and he had a little jingle that goes, his name is Duke, and that rhymes with puke, and that means cafe rock. And that was every day or every weekday, from noon to 1. Duke gets to come on. He gets to play not just the program stuff. He gets to choose. Back when DJs used to get to choose stuff they wanted to play, he could do an hour of songs that he liked, and they weren't necessarily hits, or he could do different themes and things like that. And he ended up playing this song of Neil Young's called Cowgirl in the Sand.
Oh, boy.
And you and me being, guys who love lead guitarists, we love heavy metal because of all the amazing guitars, we love blues because of all the great guitars. And he's playing all this amazing guitar work on, what is it? Is it a 10-minute song? Is it a 12-minute song? It's really long, Cowgirl. And I'd never heard it before. Now, of course, I'd heard stuff like Ohio, and I'd heard stuff like Old Man, and, maybe Southern Man and stuff like that. But I didn't really know Neil's catalog. And this song comes on, and it was amazing. But I couldn't understand what song it was, and I didn't hear him say it, or I came in the middle of it, or he said, oh, and that was Neil Young, or whatever. I'm like, oh, man, I got to go find that. So I went to Ear Ecstasy, which is the great Louisville independent record store back then. And I'm like, there's got to be a Neil Young's greatest hits. I know that was a long song. There's got to be a record where that's on. And Neil Young had Decade, which came out in, I think, 78 or so. May have been a triple album, but it was a double CD, which was a little pricey back then. That would have been $30 or whatever. But I'm like, God, it's got to be on there. It has to be, doesn't it? And because it's got like 25, 30 songs on there, something like that. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to blindly buy this. So I bought it. And then I took it home to listen to it. And I did find Cowgirl on there. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But then I learned so many more great Neil Young songs. I'm like, okay, well, this was a good purchase. And I think we listened to some of it. Did I not play Cowgirl for you sophomore year at some point?
So here's the deal with that. You had that CD, and for whatever reason, that the CD player, that was back when it would have, like, you could do repeat.
Oh, yeah.
And somehow that was on repeat, and I fell asleep. And for like 2 hours, I guess I listened to that, and I had some crazy dreams because it's a long song, and you can kind of get lost in it.
Absolutely.
And I woke up, and I'm like, man, that song is still playing. Wow, that was crazy. Yeah, it's a great tune, a great way to get into it. But like you said, then you work your way out from there. Yeah, he's got a lot of stuff that is not. Like, you kind of wonder why this wasn't more popular on the radio. Like, and I don't know, rock radio, you can complain about that all day long. Everybody has more than those two songs they want to play. But yeah, he's got a great catalog of stuff from the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young days up until what he's doing now. And I heard a interview with, it was either Stills or it wasn't Crosby. So it was either Stills or Nash. And they said they were hanging around with Young right when they were in Northern California, right when the Kent State thing happened. And I guess Young read the paper and just left. He walked out of the house they were in with his guitar in the woods. 2 hours later, he comes back and he's got the song. And he says to whoever this person is, call Crosby, tell him we're booked the studio for tomorrow. Okay. Calls David Crosby. Oh yeah, man. Yeah, we'll get it done like next week. No, not next week. We're leaving now. We're doing this tomorrow. So he was so passionate about that. He wrote the song quickly and put it out. So again, he's just got this energy that is radiating from him all the time. And when he feels passionate, and unfortunately to his detriment too, like he can't, like with the whole Spotify thing, like he can't not just say, I'm upset with this, but I'm going to keep it to myself. No.
Yep.
You're not.
That's right. So he lives by his own code, and he made some just awesome music along the way. And yeah, on Harvest, he had Crosby, Stills, and Nash all come sing backup, although he never on any one song had all three of them. It was a combination of all three pairs at one point or another. He never had every single one of them on one. Because I guess at that point, then it's a CSNY. It's not a Neil Young song with guests, right?
Yeah. Well, and I never knew that was Linda Ronstadt either. In doing this, and now I hear it. I'm like, well, of course that's Linda Ronstadt. That's Linda, her voice is very... and I guess I just never put two and two together, but that's pretty cool too. And James Taylor is there, and there's a whole nother story about Linda Ronstadt being at the Johnny Cash show, right? And yeah, apparently Johnny was very taken with her, like to the point where it's like, you better lock him up because June is going to kill him if he even tries to do anything with her.
Oh, Linda was pretty cute. Yeah, that's right. That's for sure. You can hear her on Harvest Moon as you can Nicolette Larson, who was most famous. She didn't work on Harvest, I don't think, but she worked on Take a Lot of Love, which was a big song for Neil later in the 70s, later in the decade. That's kind of was her big hit with him, and she fit in well on Harvest Moon. So that's how I got into Neil, and then I've kind of grown with him over the years. I've seen him a couple of times. I saw him at Red Rocks once, which was cool. with the Alabama Shakes opening. Those guys are actually really cool live. I was happy to see them. And then I also saw him at like a one-man kind of show. It was just like either him and the piano, him and the guitar, him and the harp. That's about it, which was kind of cool. But yeah, he still does it. I mean, he's not one of those guys who's going to retire, right? He's not going to sit around and he's always got projects going on. Whether it's the Pono project, he's done the movie projects. He's always got some stuff going on. He's still got 2 kids. So let him keep bringing his music. I say. I mean, no, I don't. Nobody's going to agree with absolutely everything he says or take his stand on everything. But he's bringing to light things that he believes need illumination, and he's fighting for people who don't have a voice to fight for themselves sometimes.
But even that Pono thing is it's ridiculous, but it's awesome at the same time because you can record. I think you can record records, but it has 0 compression on it. Like it's exactly the way, but it's extremely expensive. So I'm listening to him talk about this. I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Oh, it's $28,000 or whatever it is. Well, okay, I appreciate the conviction here, but you've priced me out of this, sir.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would love for all our digital music to sound as good as it would, on the record. I really do. They say CDs are making a comeback. I'm like, well, for me, they never really went away. But
I never got rid of one of them.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
CDs are awesome, dude. I don't know what you have against CDs. I mean, yeah, if you have 1,000 of them, they take up space, but take up less space than 1,000 records do, don't they? I don't know.
This is Neil from Daft Left Pod, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast.
Anyway, we should probably get into these records because we had 2 to do here, right? No one, even if you're not a big Neil Young fan, you've heard a couple of the songs off of Harvest, and
right,
and you starts with Out on the Weekend with Neil and the harp. And I don't know, it just jumps out at me right away. But you got that pedal steel. That's this very country kind of record right here for Neil,
Mm-hmm. And it's you don't really know what he's doing on this one because is this happy? Is it sad? What are we doing here? He's going to pack up and move to LA. It's a song I think where you can, if you kind of float on top of it, it's a great tune, but then you get into it and I think he's really talking a lot in this record about personal relationships, but also relating to the world as a human being.
Right.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I can't tell whether he's happy or sad on this. He kind of goes back and forth.
And that's kind of a country thing to me, too, right? It's like,
yeah,
there are absolutely happy, upbeat, fun, party country songs. There's no doubt about it. But most of them, it's blues for country people. It's always a little bit lamentful. You're telling a story, not because it was all awesome, because kind of warts and all. This is how I got through life, right?
And then you listen to it and you say, you know what? I can't relate to everything, but I can relate to some of what you're saying. The themes I can relate to. Yeah, low lights and thick smoke in the bar. And you're just sitting there like, you know what? Yeah, everybody's got hard times.
And everyone's, they messed it up with a woman or, a man, whatever, who they let get away or, there's always that one or, sometimes there's more than one or whatever. But, it just kind of comes out so, but it's unlike some of the stuff we've done before. So, setting the tone, country record. And then here comes Harvest, the title track. It's also very country.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, it's starting to, all of his songs have themes. And some of them are life themes, and some of them are, they're relationship things. This one, specifically to me, seems to be about how he can't reciprocate the love of a woman. Mm-hmm. Like maybe he is getting that love, but it's like he doesn't really know how to give it back, and I don't know, depending on your level of maturity, that might have happened to you at some point in your life, right?
Yeah, and the piano is nice on this one, and yeah, just that theme of, it seems like there's 2 people, but you're right, they're not on the same level. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not on the same page, I guess. Do you have this person that loves you that you can't reciprocate everything that they need?
Right.
Yeah, and how do you deal with that?
Do you not feel it? Or is it you just don't know how to show it? Or the way she shows it's different from the way you do, and she needs it the way she wants it? Yeah, I mean, that's fairly universal right there. If you've ever been in a relationship, and I can only say from the male-female perspective, which are usually pretty different.
Yeah.
It's talking about different languages, even though you're both trying to get to the same place. That's Neil Young. But Obviously, it can mean other things as well. You put songs out in the world, people interpret them as they like. I guess a lot of this was about his wife at the time, Carrie Snodgrass. She has Zeke's mother. Right. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And so a lot of this has her in it. Just like there's a lot of Peggy, who was Neil's wife for the longest time, basically between Carrie and Daryl Hannah, essentially, for like 40-odd years or whatever it was. And Ben's mother, if I'm not mistaken, was on Harvest Moon. But, those are good, like, country and Neil Young songs. When you get to A Man Needs a Maid, things change a little bit in a few different ways. Mm-hmm. The theme is all of a sudden very controversial, even back then, let alone if it came out now.
Yeah, but maybe not, though, because I think if you get mad at this, I think you're not really paying attention to what he's saying. I don't know if in 1972, obviously you didn't have the internet. I don't know if you read the back of this before you got into it, but where did the orchestra come from? That all of a sudden just appears out of nowhere. It fits, even though it seems like it shouldn't. It's really cool, but then it's like a man needs, I'm going to get a maid to clean up his home, right? Okay, but are you talking about that, or are you talking about you need somebody in your life, like a partner, almost like a maid-in, like a woman to help you along? I think that if you got mad at that, I think he's really pondering what he needs in life, and it kind of skews more toward a partner and not just like a servant. So
exactly,
everybody calm down.
Right, and I think he had literally had back surgery and needed someone to attend to him, and someone to help him out. And usually, he's a pretty self-sufficient guy. Like, I don't need someone to pick out my shirts or, whatever. But, he's like, he literally needed help. And I guess was about Carrie, who he was seeing at the time.
Special lady.
Yes, but the Tubular Bells and stuff with the London Symphony Orchestra, or the LSO, as I heard Steve Hackett refer to them on the Rock on Tours earlier this week.
He can say that.
Also, who gets to play with the LSO? So there's a lot of production for this song, and it's a song that, yes, obviously feminists say, we're not your main, but yeah, I'm sorry, no, that's not what it's about, but it's a song that he continues to play over the years, so gets away with that, I guess.
Well, I think there's more to it than that, like we were talking about before. I really like I think it's an oboe in this. It's just, again, it should not, if you said to me, okay, I'm going to make this kind of like country rock record. All right, cool. So what do we need? Well, we need a steel guitar. We need, we're going to have some banjo in there, and we're going to need the London Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well.
Wait, what? Because the other thing too is, how much did that cost back then? I mean, I understand this ended up making a ton of money, but I mean, that had to be a very large cash outlay in the beginning to get this all put together. But I guess when you're Neil Young, you can get that done.
Yeah, I suppose. And I mean, was that recorded at Abbey Road? That
I don't know. I'd have to take a look. I mean, that wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
Just because, that would be one of the spots in town that they would have recorded the LSO, if you will. Because now that I'm a Londoner, I can walk around and say stuff like LSO. People know what I'm talking about. Because they didn't fly them all over to Nashville, is my guess.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, to me, that would not be. I mean, in 1972 in Nashville, would you even have a place big? Well, I mean, I guess you had big country.
Bands, they could have recorded. Yeah, they could have recorded Nashville in a bunch of different spots, but.
But you're right. The cost would have been just astronomical to get everybody over there, get it all set up, lodging and everything. They probably did it in London.
Okay, moving on to the On to Heart of Gold, the great big hit single, the one that we all knew, little AM Gold from back in the early 70s. One of his quintessential songs, man.
And I think this one, this was the big hit single, but this kind of pushed him over with people who maybe were not Neil Young fans. It's very accessible. It's all over the place. I can't listen to this one anymore, to be honest with you.
Overplayed?
But I sent you that other one. The one, I think it was Massey Hall.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just him. There's nothing else. There's no bass. There's no guitar. There's no Linda Ronstadt. It's just him sitting all by himself with the guitar and the harmonica. And that, to me, is the way the song should have been recorded. It's this lonely dude all by himself, and that will cut you right to the bone.
Just like the needle and the damage done, man, because that's.
Oh, we'll get to that later, but yikes! Yeah, it's just this. To me, it's just this lonely song of a dude who's just on the road, just kind of passing through town to town. Just he's searching for a heart of gold. I mean, it's not that deep, but it's just like you just feel that, like, man, I really hope he gets something done here because it just seems like he's just all alone in life.
Yeah, he's been a miner for a heart of gold, and he's getting old.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's another one of those too. Like you could listen to it and think about like, oh, it's accessible when you listen to it. Just the music part of it, and the backing vocals are great by Linda Ronstadt. But yeah, when you really listen to what he's saying, it's just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
James Taylor's on that one too. Yeah. I mean, I think this is the one he never expected it to hit so big. And he felt like that was him in the middle of the road. Heart of gold. Even though, like you say, there's a little bit of darkness, there's a little bit of sadness to it, it's still incredibly relatable. So I think he's like, so I got off the middle of the road and went to the ditch. And saw some more interesting people there in the ditch. But and that's for sure true. Flip to side two, and this is the other kind of big hit from it, Old Man. Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you. You are 24, and there's so much more. And this is him being reflective at a fairly young age.
I think, well, we're missing one here. Are you ready for the country?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
5.
right. You are so right. I did skip it.
We just skipped right over that.
And I put good piano, decent slide. That's not so twangy. Just it's a little more bluesy than twangy country on that one.
Yeah, this is after that one. This is kind of a nice little palate cleanser too. It's somebody had written lazy slide on there. I'm like, yeah, it's just a dude just grooving on that slide guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more upbeat than Heart of Gold, and so yeah, I think it fits in nicely at this point in the record.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. It's also kind of a very direct reference. I mean, he almost could have called the record "Are You Ready for the Country," given that he was Mr. California and Mr. Buffalo Springfield and all that, and now he's in the heart of Nashville, right, doing his country folk thing. But you're right, and I thought everybody was good on that piece, and a good way to round out that side of the album, which it was back in the day that sold 4 million in the U.S. and it sold 1 million in France. It went diamond in France. I mean, I don't know how. Was Heart of Gold that huge of a single in France? I guess it was. It's amazing.
It just resonated with people all over the world.
Yeah. Like back then, you sell a record like that, all of a sudden you could buy, a ranch in Malibu. Well, a ranch in Malibu today is worth, my goodness, what is it not worth, right?
Well, I mean, you're gonna get to, we're gonna skip to Old Man now. What I read about that was that he had bought this ranch in, I think, the early 70s, Broken Arrow Ranch or something. He bought it for $350,000. $350,000 was a lot of money in 1970, 71, or whatever it was.
That's right.
And I think that's always kind of I say that about Neil Young, about how he kind of does whatever he wants. It kind of helps when you've got a lot of money.
That's right.
When you're struggling, then you kind of got to do what you got to do. But if you made money, you've kind of got a little more freedom to express yourself. But yeah, it's kind of a cool. This one really resonated with people too, I think.
Definitely.
The themes in it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, talk about reflecting early on in your life. Still, kind of it got a little of that banjo guitar on there? Sounds like.
Yeah, that's James Taylor, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I like the guitar at the start. And I like just something simple, but like when the drums come in, boom, boom, after he sings the first one, and then the drums come in, and then the drums are there afterwards. I think it's put together really well. After he sings the refrain a couple times, it's kind of a classic. It's one that was certainly on Decade, so it's one I listened to quite a bit in the early stages of my getting to know Neil. And I don't know, I think it's one everyone relates to on some level. Yeah,
it's another one too. If I told you Neil Young, I've never heard Neil Young before in my life. You put that song on, oh yeah, I've heard this one before. Of course you have. It's prevalent. I think it's been on some definitely different records. Like, it was on Decade, it's on this. You've heard this before. It's in the atmosphere of rock, radio, and people's consciousness.
Absolutely.
All right.
Helps define him. Yeah, absolutely. This There's a World song is kind of weird in that there's more There's more LSO, right? I
Yeah.
mean, where did that come from? There's more of it.
I wrote down this almost sounds like a number from a Broadway show or something. Like
Yeah.
it's very, again, it fits in with the record, but it doesn't sound like anything else. And again, I don't know why you thought to put the orchestra on this, but I think it sounds great. And not many rock records that actually have a harp on them. No, not a harmonica, but an actual harp that
yeah.
you pluck, and the giant thing that leans against you. It's weird, but it works.
Yes. All right. Then we get into never one to shy away from controversy.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are with Alabama, 8th song on the record, 3rd song on side 2. And it's kind of a rehashing of Southern Man.
Yes. And I believe that he and Leonard, the guys from Leonard Skinner, I think they kind of had a makeup or something afterwards. And I guess he said, yeah, this was kind of like I already kicked you and now I already pushed you down and now I'm kicking you again. Yeah, there's some pretty harsh themes in this, very generalized themes.
Yeah, I think he realized he sounded condescending on this, and when Skinner responded with Sweet Home Alabama and sung about Neil in that song, which is obviously an amazing classic kick-ass rock song, anthem song, even he's like, no, you know what, they made a great record about it and they were right to call me out. I was being a little pretentious, being a little bit of a dick. I wasn't well thought out. My words weren't really on point there. So, yes, he takes stand against things that he sees. And if he sees, he was wrong about something, he can self-correct too. I mean, it helps when they're actually, Leonard Skinner's correcting him, then he can admit that yes, you're right. But you don't see that. It's just people just kind of dig in these days, it seems.
It was like one of those old, like the in the 90s and late 80s and 90s, you had the rap battles, people going back and forth. This was like the original one of those where they would reference each other, although Neil Young never referenced Leonard Skinner. But the whole thing about banjos playing through broken glass and the old folks in white robes, it's like, okay, I guess that's the thing, is that, are there people that are racist in Alabama? Sure, but they're everywhere, and you can't generalize.
Right.
There's a lot of great people in Alabama who are not like that, so it's not really fair to lump everyone together.
I mean, you're saying stuff like the weight on your shoulders is breaking your back. What's going on wrong? You've got the union to help you. It's like that. I know people from Alabama. I know them pretty well. I spent a lot of time down there. They don't want to hear that. That's not the way you're going to win them over.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
Talking at them about what they ought to be doing, sorry, it's just not going to work. So, and the song's not that good. Southern Man's actually a pretty good song, and it kind of paints this picture of some really nasty stuff that happened down there. Alabama's just kind of, flipping and a little nasty for no real reason.
Although, I mean, I guess at the end of the day on this one, I am glad that he realized that and was like, that was a misfire. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Apologize. Let's move on.
Exactly. Take your shots and admit your mistakes. That's all good. Speaking of taking your shots, here comes the needle and the damage done. I, for the longest time, I don't think I even realized that this was live. This was recorded live at UCLA. This wasn't just done in the studio. Obviously about heroin, right? Every junkie's like the setting sun and all the talent we've missed out on because of this nasty drug.
Yeah. And in listening to this, what I wrote down was, this can't just be 2 minutes long. Like, it just seems like it's way longer than that. I mean, it packs a lot of stuff into this. The guitar part starts off, okay, and then whammy. It's just the most brutal themes of this. You think of rock stars and living the rock star lifestyle, and this is the dark alley that it's going to lead you into.
That's right.
I hear you knocking on my back door. I love you, baby. Can I have some more? Like, that's like being, apparently, just for the record, I've never done heroin before, but I've heard it's the worst thing on the face of the earth, because you will, no matter what, you will end up a junkie. Yep. There's no getting around that. And it's just the most awful thing on the face of the earth.
Yep.
And to have him put it like that, to tell about the inevitable nasty side of it, I could have sworn this song was way longer than 2 minutes. It's just epic. He packs a lot into a little amount of time.
And because he didn't do it with a band, it's him and his guitar with those poignant words. Yeah, it cuts right through. There's no production of it. There's nothing to get muddled. It's just this is the story. This is the way it begins and it ends, and it always ends. It's not good. But again, it's a classic Neil Young song, and he's played it for years and years, and everyone knows that one. The last song on the record, Words, Between the Line of Age, in some ways I feel like it's the most Neil song on the record.
And why would you say that?
Well, because it's not just country acoustic, it's more rocking, a little bit more rocking with Neil, with a little bit louder solo guitar and riff work on there. And again, he's talking about words, and he slows it down in parts. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like riff-wise, it's very Neil Young to me.
It doesn't seem like it's real off a tick. Like it fits in the song, the guitar work, but it doesn't follow any kind of real meter. I don't think. It's kind of like he's just improvising it the whole time. It's got a real nice instrumental part in the middle of it, and I want to say I saw Bradley Cooper on like Jimmy Kimmel or something, and he's like he loves this song so much he can air guitar to the kind of the off guitar parts, and he did a pretty good job. I'm like,
was this that song? I saw him do it, but it wasn't I just remember he wasn't doing it something I would have done it to, like a hurricane or something like that.
And that's exactly Cowgirl, what he said. Right? He's like this. I listened to this song 100,000 times. I love it. It's not something everybody's going to want to know, and it's you can't. Again, it doesn't fall. Like the time signature is really weird, but he had it nailed, and it was somebody who had listened to it so many times. And you're right, it's one of those things where it's like, if you say Words by Neil Young, I've never heard of that song before. You're right, because it's mine.
That's right.
It's my favorite. Yeah, and it's a nice way to end it too. It's a little hidden gem on this deal.
Yeah, good for Phil from The Hangover. Yeah. Good for him for knowing that one. Oh, I know he's been a lot of other stuff, but he's Phil. I don't care what kind of Oscars they want to hand you or awards or nominations, you're Phil.
I think it's kind of weird that I have to tell you again to put your pants on.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast.
So that's Harvest, album of the year, 1972, turning 50 this year. And then 20 years later, he decided to make Harvest Moon. Now, I didn't pick this up while we were in school. You said you remember hearing Harvest Moon on the radio. I don't. I kind of had no knowledge of it, or I completely overlooked it. But when I got to business school, when I got to graduate school, I met a guy who was a couple years older, pretty cool, and he let me listen to his copy of it, and he knew it really well, and he was like very erudite. He wanted to make movies, and so he knew how to choose his words because he wanted to be a writer and things very well, and describe things way better than I do on this podcast. More succinctly, more colorfully, with better adverbs and adjectives that I don't really know the meaning to. I'm like, oh, well, he must know what he's talking about. So, I remember listening to this quite a bit for a few years and picking out a few songs to put on, like, chill mixes, like the mellow mix or whatever, because there's a lot of that on here. And I guess it was, not only did he want to revisit it with a lot of the same artists, but he also wanted to do it analog, right? He didn't want to use all the digital techniques that had become so very popular over the last 10, 12 years and wanted to do it kind of in an old school way. And I got to tell you, the sound is high quality.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there something wrong with him at this point in time? Like he had hearing loss or something, and so he wanted to just kind of take it way down and back to the more like you said, more of a mellow sound, not guitars turned up to 15, the ones that you had to record in a different studio because they were so loud. But you're right. The production on this is top notch.
Top notch, yeah. Well, and I guess, after doing Rockin' in the Free World and doing Freedom and doing like Farm Aid in front of these huge crowds which require huge speaker rigs and stuff like that, I think maybe he wanted to and he did Ragged Glory, I think, maybe in the middle of there. So, I mean, he has always worked. He has never really sat still. He's always gone out and worked one way or the other. But then, it was like a good time to revisit something that was a big deal. I mean, you're the number one record of the year. That doesn't happen to everybody.
Right. And to kind of check back in, there's a lot of similarities. I think they're both 10 tracks long. I don't know what the runtime is, but I would imagine they're probably fairly close. Just kind of stop for a minute. It's almost like you're on the freeway, you're driving 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm going to take this exit. I'm going to get off. I'm going to reflect for a minute, just kind of slow it down, and give a nod to this giant record that kind of put him on the map as a solo star, and you just kind of take stock of where he is now.
Yeah,
in
and
1992.
Yeah, and you mentioned the length there. I mean, yeah, a lot of songs are a little longer. The last track on Harvest Moon, Natural Beauty, is 10 minutes long. If you take that off, I think they're a lot closer or if maybe you made Natural Beauty somehow a 3.5 minute song, maybe it's closer. But no, I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, in the 70s, it wasn't supposed to be more than 3.5, 4 minutes at the very most, Obviously that changed, and once you've got all these great musicians around you again, namely the Stray Gators, which, by the way, so Ben Keith, Tim Drummond, and Kenny Buttrey with Jack Nitschke were the Stray Gators on Harvest. Same guys came back for Harvest Moon, except Jack Nitschke did the string arrangement on Such a Woman. He did not play the piano. That was Spooner Oldham. Now, Spooner's the only one of any of those guys, any of those 5 guys, who are still alive. But Spooner got the name Spooner because as a kid, he lost his eye, like a frying pan went up, hit a spoon, the spoon hit him in the eye or something like that. And that's why the kids called him Spooner, because he lost his eye with a spoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're never gonna let me forget that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, kids.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, where's he from? Well, he's from Alabama. Like, oh, yeah, the kids in Alabama are mean. That's why Neil Young wrote that mean song, Alabama. That's how we bring it all together here, folks. So it took me a few years before it came out to discover it. And then I've listened to this a lot more than I've listened to Harvest, at least front to back. I've probably heard the hits on Harvest more, but front to back, this is a great one. It's a great one to put on. It's very chill. And like you said, it's crystal clear, too, It just sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Unknown Legend, cool way to start off an album. It's about a mom, a woman who was she was a badass back in the day, and she rode a Harley, and she used to party, but now, she's got a couple kids, she's got to wait tables to make ends meet, but, unbeknownst to the people who come in for coffee and toast, they're in the presence of a legend.
Right, and I kind of feel like listening to this song, it's like Neil is passing through, some town, and he's the guy sitting at the counter, and he encounters this person, and, you don't realize these two things are, you don't realize that she has this whole other backstory. So it's kind of he's telling this Americana, hitchhiking across the country story.
Exactly. And I think he wrote, this was one that had been around a while too. Like he wrote it in 78, like during those sessions around that time, and it just never came all the way together. And so he has kept it. I mean, look, like I said, the guy's prolific. And if you're prolific, you're going to have bits and pieces from all over. Some great unreleased stuff that he did in the 70s that have just come out here recently, that some of it showed up over the years, but never in whole like that. Just amazing. His catalog. Great pedal steel by Ben Keith here, though.
Yeah.
Good
yeah.
stuff.
And I wonder, too, if he had written this song, what the original was like to this. Like, could he only have finished it now that he's older and kind of has that perspective on a life that it's not over? But again, we're in a different phase of it now. Right.
We've seen a lot more of the road. There's not nearly as much road as there used to be, though there's still road left. I know. Yeah. And then from Hank to Hendrix, I mean, assuming we're talking about Hank Williams.
This ain't no Hank Williams song.
No, but it's kind of cool because you think that, from the time you first heard Hank Williams to the time you first heard Jimi Hendrix, having a relationship during that time, while also using pop references as far as, how things changed, like how things may have changed between him and his mother and father, between Hank and Hendrix, and maybe how did things change between his woman and he, between Marilyn and Madonna, using pop culture references to kind of frame relationship time.
Yeah, and kind of looking back on, again, this is a guy who's now been farther along in life. Do you look at, can you get more out of Hank Williams songs or Jimi Hendrix songs now that you're older? You're kind of more reflective, and then using the kind of the newer stuff too to look back on.
Yeah.
Referencing Madonna. I mean, whether you like Madonna or whether you don't like Madonna, she was and still is a giant influence in the music business.
She's a
Pop
force.
culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So it is cool that he put kind of all that stuff together. It wasn't just the old stuff. its new stuff as well.
Yeah, and he has his signature harmonica on it. I think the harmonica he's a brilliant player of, and his signature on the song is that harp.
Yeah, and I think the only other person that you can say that about really is like Stevie Wonder. Like Stevie Wonder plays the harmonica, you know that's him. Same thing with Neil Young. One note, and you're like, that's got to be him. Just the way that he plays it. It's almost because he's got the. Usually he doesn't play the it's one key because it's on the clip thing.
Right.
So he's got to go back and forth on him. Yeah, he just has a very signature sound to it.
Very much so. And sounds great here. Next song, You and Me, it's even slower. And, a lot of times on rock records, it's come out big on the first one. The second one, you got to ramp up a little bit. The third one, you got to bring back a little bit. To me, each song got a little slower, and this is like the third in the series. I do like the vocal harmonies on here. I mean, I think that both Nicolette and Linda and some of and Astrid Young, who's his half-sister, who have all sung on this record, the female harmonies on this really make it special to me. I like harmonies, whether it's Def Leppard or whomever it is. And I don't know, I like this one. Heavy acoustic in some spots. I mean, like heavy, like almost metalish, like Weld, Neil Young, Crazy Horse heavy, only it's acoustic, so it's not that heavy. But it's also nice and soft. I was thinking about you and me. It's a nice one.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I kind of got from going back and digging through both of these records is I kind of always think like a riff is, electric guitar, but you can definitely have riff-esque things on the acoustic guitar too, and I think he does a good job of putting those in there kind of like signature notes on these slower songs, which I didn't think was possible before this.
Yeah, if anyone could do it, it'd be him. I mean, he can do power chords and riffs as well as anybody can. He's very good at that, but he's also great at the acoustic. It seems like you're usually great at one or the other. Maybe blues to a degree, you can kind of do both. I don't know. His songs can be very different that way.
Yeah, he's definitely, if you had to classify Neil Young as one type of music, you probably have a hard time because it's not going to be, is he rock? Is he country? Is he blues? He's just Neil Young. Like that's right. What he's his own subcategory off to the side.
Yeah. All right. And Harvest Moon, the title track, very country. It's a beautiful song. It really is. It got into the charts in the UK, which I was not aware of, obviously, but it did really well in Canada, but sold well over here. It was actually kind of a hit a little bit for him over here, which is, I think it just in between 30 and 40 somewhere, but still it was a big deal for him back in the day. I think it's a classic Neil Young song, very well produced, great pedal. I mean, everything on here is really good.
And it's a kind of a nice rest too, because I think it's a love song to his wife, kind of real for Neil Young, real like easy, breezy. We're not talking about destroying the environment just yet. It's, it's just a nice, you can just put it on and listen to it and I think in the video, if I'm correct, it's like a dance, like a midsummer.
With his wife, Peggy,
Yeah. And that's really what it feels like.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the first Harvest was about Carrie Snodgrass, who was, he was getting on with, and now this was a lot about Peggy, who he'd been with for a very long time, and he was with her, almost 40 years or something like that. So a lot of the stuff that feels like it's about relationships or it's about a couple things, one of them is always about relationship, and his relationship to Peggy, I think, is kind of a string throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, but this is one you could definitely play for the missus, and would enjoy it quite a bit.
And my missus does. That's a fact. But now I like War of Man. I like the next song. Obviously this is a little bit of a protest song, but I like how it fades in and out a little bit. I like the guitar in it. I like the vocal harmonies on this a lot.
Well, yeah, like I said, Harvest Moon was your rest, and now here we go again. Because this is pretty heavy duty. Linda Ronstadt's on this. She sounds great. No one wins. It's a war of men. It's like, okay, I guess we'll get back to death and destruction and what we're doing to the planet these days. But it's a great song. It's got more weight to it.
Absolutely. And it might have gotten onto some kind of a mainstream rock chart or something like that at some point, but I've never heard it on the radio to the best of my needs. I think Harvest Moon I have heard on the radio, but nothing else off this one. One of these days, I'm going to write a long letter. It seems like he's starting to already lament, because he's not that old. He's no kid, but he's like remembering Buddy's gone,
Right.
folks he's lost along the way. And of course, he's making this record with the Stray Gators, and now all of them, except for maybe one of them. Even Nicolette Larson didn't live that much longer after this record came out. So it was like, within the next 20, 30 years, he would lose all these folks. It's a lament. It's good Neil Young, and I bet he would tear up if he played it today.
And so you mentioned there were some people on the Harvest record that are not on this record.
Yes.
And are we talking about perhaps Crosby, Stills, and Nash, who you are going to write a letter to? Maybe maybe the bridges aren't burned, but they're definitely smoldering at this point in time. And, you're going to, again, you get to the point in your life where you're taking stock and you're like, whatever we were fighting about, whatever we disagreed with, it's stupid. Let's just be friends again, like we used to be. And so, it's that, just kind of looking back, taking stock. And, and then I wrote down, I hope you wrote that letter, because you kept saying you were going to. Did you? Because it's important. Well. Again, like you said, these people aren't going to live forever. It's not worth having time go by that you didn't talk to them for whatever stupid reason.
Well said, Jackson. Well said.
Thank you.
And I don't know if that's the case or not, but if that's what it conjures in you, then let it out.
All right. Here we go.
All right. Orchestration on this one. I don't think it was with the London Symphony Orchestra, but there's a whole lot of players on this Such a Woman song. And it's not even like it's overwhelming. It's personnel on Such a Woman. Yeah, we've got a conductor. We've got the concertmaster. We've got all these violins and violas and cellos. I mean, you've got a big string section on Such a Woman, and it's not like it's hugely prominent in the song. In some ways, I feel like it's overproduced for what this album is, going back to analog and all that. I mean, it fits, but it's a little over the top-ish for this. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see how you would say that. Yeah, there is a lot going on this, and now we're kind of back to the relationship deal. Are we, like we talked about on Harvest, this is one to me where it's like you have a relationship with somebody, and are we on the same page? Can we get this together? Like, there's no one can kill me like you. No one else fills me like you do. So it's like, you kind of got a lot riding on this.
Right. Or is that life on the road?
Yeah. Okay. Or, is that it too? Again, he's looking back and just kind of reflecting on this.
Right. It's like, am I supposed to stop now that I'm in my 50s and I have money? Most people have to tour because they don't have money, right? But I've got it. So do I have to do that?
I've got these. Yeah, I still got things to say. I still want to make. Again, I remember when this came out, and just again, I was not a huge Neil Young fan, but like people like freaked out when this record came out because they're like, "Oh, this is a return to form."
Right.
That he's going back to the Harvest days, and I was like, "Okay, I guess whatever you say."
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this was a much bigger record for him than I gave it credit for in 1992.
Yeah, well, and Harvest, obviously we knew the hits, but we weren't alive in 1972, so we didn't know that it was album of the year and it was played all over the radio that year. We weren't there to experience that. So for a lot of people, even though Harvest Moon is like his 19th record, a lot of people had like 2 or maybe 3 Neil Young records, but Harvest was one, for almost everybody, right? And that's just kind of the way it worked.
I think a lot of people jumped back on the train, without that. Maybe you didn't get the Crazy Horse stuff. That was a little bit too out there for you, but this was literally like an old friend coming back to you.
Well, and he did some stuff in the 80s, like doing stuff like it sounded like it was from the 50s. Which was kind of weird. He also did, an album Trans because it was like, Ben has, I don't know what affects him. He has some kind of mental and physical disability, and he has to kind of have like a machine, or it sounds like a box or something when he talks. So Neil kind of did a whole album or most of his album singing through that box. And it's like, okay, to express this is the way my son, expresses himself, so I'm going to do it. And so obviously that wasn't going to run up the charts. And so there was a lot of different stuff that he did in the 80s where he wasn't on the new wave movement and he wasn't in the hair metal thing. It wasn't until like the late 80s when it was This Note's For You and then Rockin' in the Free World. It's like, okay, yeah, Neil Young is Now we'll listen to him again, and then this was like, all right, well, now if I've got your attention, here's a record I really want to make. People who I love and do it the right way.
Well, and I remember, too, right about this time, like this is when all the big Seattle bands were starting to break or maybe had broken. And a lot of them, they credited Neil Young. He was like the godfather of grunge, with the sound that he had. And, he was big friends with Pearl Jam.
Oh, yeah.
At that point in time. Yeah, so I had to have him switch gears like this. You'd figure, oh, well, with all the praise that he's getting, he would just go and keep doing the same thing. Nope. I'm doing this now. And I think that even those guys loved it too, because, they were probably, those guys are probably 10 years older than we are, give or take, the Seattle guys.
Oh yeah,
probably.
maybe not, maybe 5. I don't think Dave Grohl is more than 5 years older than we are.
Okay, but they could have been more familiar with his older works too.
Oh sure,
than we were. So yeah, just a guy who just defies convention. Like you've got these dudes praising him for basically creating a new genre of music and then switching gears and doing something else.
Yeah,
and having it be a hit.
Absolutely, and one that people look back to is like he did it again. Some people make big records and they never do again. And then he comes in, gets a lot of the same folks, and recreates the magic. And look, the old King song, I love this song. Got a good old dog jump off the back of the truck. Get a little banjo guitar on there. Nicolette Larson's really good on there. It's kind of a silly song. Yes, it's something that happened out your back door, but it's a fun song.
I really feel like in listening to this song, it was like, Neil, can you write a country song like a You know what? Give me a minute. Hold on. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And then you think about the dog that you love. I think it was a real dog, right? His King.
I think so.
And so, yeah, it's kind of a silly little song, but then a shout out to his buddy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. My dog and I went on a long walk, big hike around Primrose Hill yesterday. Gave him a bath, and then we went outside to the pub to have a pint. And he's worn out.
Did he?
So he was the belle of the ball, man. People couldn't come over and walk over to him quick enough, and he was so worn out he didn't want to jump all over everybody. He just wanted to walk over to him and kiss their hands and then walk back to me, and I'd scratch his head. I'm like, this is a song about you, Dougal dog. You're an old King dog. Yeah, good companionship, man, and everyone can relate to that unless you own a cat.
And we're not talking to you.
Yes,
sorry.
You're not downloading the show. We know it. We've seen the numbers. We've run the demographics. Cat people do not listen to the wolf.
All right. Moving on now.
All right. So you come to Dreamin' Man, which it's not a bad song. It fits for the rest of the album. It's got a cool little bit of Spanish kind of guitar in it here. Mm-hmm. To me, this is, if there's 10 songs in the album, this is my rank number 10. It's not that it's bad. It's just, it doesn't stand out to me. It's kind of like, even though the Spanish guitar does make it a little different, it just kind of, it's my 10th out of 10.
Yeah, it's a nice, I wrote down, it's got a nice bass groove to it too. The bass kind of just walks around there. I don't know really what he's talking about. It could be somebody who's not 100% got a stranglehold on reality. I don't know what's going on here. Like you said, it's not a bad song, but if you had to get rid of one, this would probably be it.
That's just it for me. Now, it ends with Natural Beauty, the 10-minute epic, which was recorded live in Portland, which makes it even kind of more amazing. I don't know, it kind of has pieces of all the other tracks put together in some ways on here. You obviously couldn't have released this on Harvest back in the day. You couldn't wrap the album with a 10-minute song because this puts it at like 52 minutes, and there's no way that would have been the case back in 1972. I don't think they could have fit all that onto one LP.
Yeah.
But, and I'm not sure if it's also about Peggy, which it probably is, because it seems to be about relationships, all of his stuff is. But it seems like when you're talking about being preserved as a monument, Natural Beauty, if it's about national parks and preserving that, I am all down with that, man. I love big natural beauty. I love our national park system in America. I love the park system in my hometown of Louisville. And I spend as much time as I can in the city of London in the parks that I am surrounded by. So if it takes this 10 minutes to talk about how much he loves natural beauty, I say let him roll with it, man.
Yeah, there's some stuff in there about, the Amazon, what's going on there. And I'm like, oh, you're not talking about Jeff Bezos. This was before all that. Okay, yes. Yeah, just what are we doing? Yeah, we need to preserve as much of this as we can. Yeah, like you said, the national parks we have here are fantastic. I wrote down, this to me sounds a lot more like this could have come off of Harvest, or that time. The guitar part in there, I think there's a xylophone somewhere in the background. That's kind of a nice touch. It fits on here. It is 10 minutes, but it doesn't feel like 10 minutes.
No, it doesn't.
Like sometimes you hear 10-minute songs, you're like, oh, enough already, let's go.
Right.
This does not. I think he definitely has something to say about something on his mind, something on his heart, and it fits. It's a nice way to end this. And kind of a nice nod to, we talked about the Needle and the damage done was live. Here's another live track on this one to kind of connect the two again.
Yeah, no, you're right. They both have 10 songs, and I like it better, to be honest with you. But I've had the opportunity to hear both of them after they came out, in some ways long after they've come out. And I do like Harvest Moon better than Harvest. And obviously, I could not have bought Harvest when it first came out because I was not even alive yet. I owned some of those songs on Decade for a long time and got familiar with the hits, but didn't hear the whole message, the whole statement of the entire release. And I'm a big believer in that. Like, it's great if a single catches your ear, but you really need, and if that leads you to an album, awesome. But the real statement is the album. Right, that year or 6 months as it was back in the days, or just a few months, but whatever it was, that point in time with those people in that place in your life, what's all that mean? I think Harvest Moon is someone who knew where they were in life. He's in his 40s at that point, reflecting on a lot of success. Glad some people are still around. Sorry, some aren't anymore. Doing the best at his life relationships. Doing his best, to get by just like everybody else. I don't know. Harvest is a young man with a lot going on, whereas a Harvest Moon is an old man who's like, wow, I had a lot going on back then. Mm-hmm. Still do.
So you said you listened to this Harvest Moon quite a bit. What is your favorite track off of this?
It might be War of Man. I don't sing that one. You can sing Harvest Moon. It is a nice song. But I do like Old King just because it puts a smile on my face every time.
That's a nice one because I'd never heard that song before, and you listen to it and you're like, you know what, that is nice that you can just write an easy song about your buddy and just kind of have it. I put like tongue in cheek, country song because aren't all country songs about pickup trucks and dogs? Right. What's wrong with a story about a pickup truck and a dog? There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
It's a sincere story, and it's got a little bit of a humor to it. It's also got some starkness. Then one day, king up and died. Well, that's what happens. Dog owners know they don't live forever. That's why you love them so much while you got them.
Correct.
That they don't grow up into nasty teenagers.
They will love you unconditionally every single day.
Exactly. So whatever that means, I guess you're not going to get Harvest or Harvest Moon on Spotify anymore. And that's why we don't put clips of the songs into the show, because we want to be on Spotify because, well, we got to get listeners however we got to get them. I'm sorry, Neil. I'm sorry. When I have money, I'll have morals too. But until then, I have to make no money on people listening to my podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Will that change anything? I doubt it. But he made his stand, and so good for him.
Well, and some other people are following. Does it stay that way? Do the Foo Fighters stay off Spotify forever? I can see Joni staying off of there, forever. It's easy for her to do, but
yeah.
Who knows? Does it hurt their stock price? I doubt it. Not a whole lot. I mean, I'd probably rather have the number one podcast in the world than the occasional Neil Young, Joni Mitchell stream. I don't,
Yeah. Yeah, if they have to pick sides, what side they're going to pick.
As a business, personally, I would pick the opposite 100% of the time. But as the corporation Spotify, I think they're like, yep, sure, go ahead and leave. That's fine. There's 60 million other songs that will have streamed on there without you. So no skin off our nose. So, right. But yeah, hey, make your stand, live the life the way you want to. Call attention to stuff that you think needs attention. That's kind of the way he's always done it. Sometimes they're good. I don't see anybody who has a problem with Farm Aid, but sometimes not everybody agrees with what he's saying. Hey, he's living his authentic life as best he can, I guess.
With Daryl Hannah.
Oh man.
You gonna be all right?
No.
Need a minute?
Okay. She directed that movie. Oh, what was it called? It had an odd name. It was like Neil and the Nelson brothers in some kind of an odd movie scape, and it had music and it was kind of a tale. I don't know. You got to check it out. I think it's on Netflix. What's the name of that?
Right.
Paradox, yeah. Paradox with
Right.
Promise of the Real, who were like Willie Nelson's sons and some other great guys. Yeah, it's a Western kind of thing. It was a South by Southwest kind of thing. And it's a few years old at this point. She says her directorial debut wasn't a real movie. It's kind of not. It's not like it has this extraordinary plot or, all this resolution. Okay. But hey, if Daryl Hannah wants to make a movie, I think there's going to be people who enable her.
Well, I'll have to check it out.
What's your favorite Daryl Hannah movies?
My favorite Daryl Hannah movie's got to be Splash.
Blade Runner, man.
Well, but see, here's the thing. Blade Runner's a great movie, but in Splash, she is so incredibly hot. It is
and she's in
ridiculous,
the whole movie.
Ridiculous. But yeah, and you gotta love Kill Bill too. I mean, that's a great movie.
Kill Bill, yeah. I like Roxanne. Is that when the Cyrano de Bergerac with Steve Martin? Was that called Roxanne?
Yes, yeah, where he's the fireman or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty funny too.
What was the movie with Mickey Rourke and Eric Roberts?
Greenwich Village.
Yeah, wasn't she in that?
She might have been, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, but she
was
when Eric Roberts, young and hot back then. Yeah. It was unbelievable.
Yes, yeah, I'm telling you, when I saw Splash for the first time, like that's the most beautiful one I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's that
on the planet.
That long blonde hair, man. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that concludes our look at Neil Young's classic Harvest, which just turned 50 as we're releasing this show, and its follow-up, Harvest Moon, which is celebrating the 30th anniversary of its release, the 20-year follow-up to Harvest with the same cast of characters, same recording style and methods, and a lot of the same feelings, I guess, are coming out on that one as Harvest. Two great records from an amazing artist. And yes, we decided to do this. We decided to move the Neil Young show up a bit because Neil got into the news with his contention with Spotify and Joe Rogan spreading what he calls misinformation about COVID-19. So we decided to hop on the back of that kind of marketing and PR campaign, if you will. We're going to stay on Spotify, so if you want to hear something about Neil Young, you can hear it from us on Neil Young. But the bottom line is, Neil Young is a man of conviction. And when he sees something he doesn't like, he attacks it. He does whatever he has in his own power to do to try to fix it or make it better. And that's what this whole thing has been about. Neil has made incredible music over the years, Harvest being a high watermark for a lot of people. I think Harvest Moon is a better album. Personally, maybe it didn't have the same success. Maybe it doesn't hold the same place in people's heart as the Harvest record did and a lot of the other stuff he may have done in the 60s and 70s. But to me, it's an amazing, amazing record, and I'm really glad that it came into my life. And I'm glad Neil Young is around for a lot of different reasons. So I hope you enjoyed that show. And as usual, folks who might know more than we do, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? You've got to let us know. Please tweet us or DM us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. And you can check out all past episodes at www.uglyamericanawerewolf.libsyn.com. Of course, you can download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast, be it Amazon, Google, Apple, or even Spotify. If you're still on there after the whole Neil Young thing, you can still get Ugly American Werewolf in London there. Now, as promised at the end of the last episode, we are going to go ahead and give you our review on Appetite for Destruction, along with our friend Chris from Canada and the Great White North. It was a good show. We were ready to put it out this week, but we wanted to capitalize on the surge of Neil Young interest, and so we decided to put the Neil Young show out first. But Appetite's coming out next, so please tune in for that. And as usual, for everyone all over the world, be cool and stay safe.